Under the bruised winter sky of Chicago, a 5-year-old girl told a homeless stranger she could be her mother. And for a heartbeat, the world froze with her words. Emma Carter's small voice sliced through the wind-sharp and impossibly sincere, making commuters glance over as if sensing an omen. Daniel Carter, still on a business call, turned just in time to see his daughter standing before a bus stop bench offering a bear-shaped cookie to a young woman who looked like she'd been carved out of frost and exhaustion. His stomach dropped. He ended the call without a word, the cold biting at his throat as he strode toward them, every protective instinct roaring awake. Grace Bennett didn't move at first. She sat hunched beneath a threadbare coat, golden hair tangled and powdered with snow, her pale hands clutched around a faded canvas tote as if it held the last pieces of her life. Her eyes lifted slowly, two washed-out blue embers barely clinging to light. She had the stillness of someone accustomed to disappearing. But Emma, small and stubborn, leaned closer, whispering something only children dared to believe, that broken people could fit perfectly into the empty spaces in others. Daniel pulled his daughter back, the fear in his chest rising fast and hot. "Mom, what are you doing with my daughter?" he demanded. Grace raised both hands instantly, palms exposed, a surrender shaped by years of being blamed, first listened to later. Nothing she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "She came to me." Daniel scanned her face. Fever clung to her skin like a second layer, too flushed in the wrong places, too pale in others. Her lips trembled as if every breath cost her something she could not afford. A shiver tore through her frame, almost invisible but unmistakable to a man who had once lived through long hospital nights beside a dying wife. He didn't want the memory, but it rose anyway, sharp as broken glass. Emma tugged his sleeve, pointing toward the snow, where a scrawny cat pawed at crumbs from a half-eaten roll. She shared her bread with the kitty, Emma said solemnly, and Daniel's chest twisted. Grace hadn't asked for help. She hadn't even spoken first. She was simply there, trying not to need anything. He took Emma's hand. "We're leaving," he muttered. But behind him, something shifted, an instinct, a whisper, or maybe fate. The metallic clang came first, and then the thud. Daniel spun as Grace crumpled against the icy pole, her knees buckling as if they had finally surrendered to the weight of her body. The world snapped into slow motion. Emma gasped. Daniel ran. The snow swallowed the sound of impact. Grace lay folded into herself, breath-shallow skin, blazing with fever, but freezing to the touch. Daniel pressed 2 fingers to her neck. A pulse flickered weakly beneath his fingertips. Too weak. For a moment he hesitated. She was a stranger, a problem he had not asked for. But something inside him, something scarred and stubborn, refused to leave her dying in the cold. No cars passed, no pedestrians lingered, and waiting for an ambulance in a blizzard would be a gamble with death. His decision came fast, almost violent. He scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, like a life reduced to hollow bones and fading breath. As her coat swung open, Daniel saw bruises tracing her arms, old ones, new ones, stories she wasn't telling, and his grip tightened. She whimpered at the contact, and the sound so small it lodged in his ribs. Emma hurried beside him, her boots sinking into the snow with each step, as she whispered, "Daddy, is she going to die?" Daniel didn't lie. "Not if we get her warm." The wind beat against them, a feral thing, as if trying to steal Grace back. Daniel moved faster, heart pounding, mind racing. He didn't know this woman, didn't know her name, didn't know that months ago she had stood on a New York runway under bright lights, praised as the rising star of fashion, only to be shattered overnight by an accusation that stripped her of everything. He didn't know she was stronger than she looked, fiercer than anyone expected, a woman people assumed was powerless simply because power no longer served her. But under the surface, Grace still held a quiet authority, the kind built from surviving the collapse of an entire life. The porch light came into view, glowing like a promise. Daniel pushed through the snow, the weight in his arms growing heavier, not physically, but morally. He crossed his threshold, a boundary he had guarded fiercely for years, and in that moment something shifted. The house, long silent since his wife's death, inhaled. Emma stood by the doorway, cheeks flushed, eyes large with a belief only children dared hold that this fragile stranger belonged with them. Daniel didn't answer her when she whispered it again. He only tightened his hold on Grace and stepped inside, letting the door close behind them, shutting out the storm as if sealing the first twist of a fate about to rewrite all their lives. Grace Bennett surfaced from darkness into warmth, a shock so abrupt it felt like another world. Hours earlier, she'd been crumpled beneath a bus stop, breathing in the metallic taste of winter, convinced the night would swallow her whole. Now she woke on a long sofa wrapped in a wool blanket, the glow of a fireplace staining the room in soft amber. The scent of cedar and cinnamon drifted through the air, gentle and unfamiliar, as if the house itself were breathing around her. She blinked slowly, disoriented, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird. A faint scratching sound pulled her attention downward. Little Emma Carter sat on the rug with a set of crayons humming off key as she drew with fierce concentration. When she noticed Grace stir, Emma brightened as though sunrise had entered the room. "You woke up," she whispered, lifting a colorful page drawn with shaky but determined lines. 3 stick figures stood beneath a crooked roof, hands linked. One tall, one tiny, one with a halo of messy blonde hair. Above them the words, "My home." Grace inhaled sharply. No one had pictured her as belonging anywhere in years. Before she could speak, footsteps crossed the wooden floor. Daniel Carter entered holding a glass of water and a small bowl of soup. His face carried the exhaustion of a man who lived with grief like a shadow at his back. He set the items on the table without looking at her right away. "You collapsed in the snow," he said, voice controlled, steady out of habit. "I did what I had to. When you are better, you can leave." The words were careful, not cruel, but they stung all the same. Grace lowered her gaze and murmured a soft, "Thank you," the phrase tasting like defeat. Daniel gently guided Emma to give Grace space, though the little girl clearly wanted to stay. When the room quieted, Grace sipped the water, letting the coolness anchor her inside a body that kept trying to slip into fever. She watched the fire flicker and wondered how long she had been running from cold, from blame, from the remnants of a life reduced to nothing more than a canvas tote and old bruises. Every kindness felt dangerous. Every warmth felt temporary. At dinner, she insisted on sitting apart at the breakfast bar, unwilling to drift any closer to a family rhythm she had no right to disturb. She ate slowly, thanking Daniel for each gesture with polite restraint. When she reached for a tray of cups, her sleeve fell back, revealing the long scar etched across her wrist, pale and jagged. Daniel noticed. The moment froze in the quiet kitchen. He said nothing, but the silence pressed between them, charged with questions neither dared touch. Later, when the house settled into stillness, Daniel read in bed but could not focus. Something tugged at him, an unease he recognized from nights spent beside hospital machines, when hope thinned to threads. A soft, barely audible moan drifted from the living room. Instantly, he rose. On the sofa, Grace lay curled into herself, skin slick with fever breath, shallow trembling with a pain she tried, even in sleep, to hide. He hesitated only a second before calling a private physician. The doctor arrived within the hour, examining Grace under the lamplight, while she drifted in and out of consciousness. "Severely dehydrated," he murmured. "Fever still high." She needs fluids and warmth. Does she have insurance? Anyone we can notify? Grace's eyes fluttered open just long enough for a broken whisper. No one. No one needs to know if I am alive. The words hung in the air like cold smoke, and Daniel felt something shift inside him, sharp and undeniable. He saw not a stranger on his sofa, but a person hollowed by abandonment, someone who had been left behind too many times to believe she mattered. The doctor left instructions and disappeared into the snowy night. Daniel remained standing beside Grace, watching the rise and fall of her breath. He told himself he was simply ensuring she survived the night. But the truth pulsed beneath that thought, steady and undeniable. Something had already begun to change. Morning unfurled softly over the Carter house, but it could not soften the tension sitting beneath Daniel's ribs. Grace Bennett moved quietly through the kitchen, her steps light, almost apologetic, as though she feared leaving footprints on a life that was not hers. Her fever had broken, but her fragility remained visible in every careful breath she took. She insisted on helping, repeating that small acts steadied her mind. Daniel allowed it only because refusing seemed cruel. Yet something inside him stayed braced, uncertain, watchful. Grace tied her hair back and began chopping vegetables, turning leftovers into a simmering pot of soup that filled the kitchen with warm rosemary and pepper. Emma watched from her seat at the table, swinging her legs and humming as though the house had never known silence. Daniel returned from his study laptop tucked under his arm, the aroma pulling him toward the stove before he could remind himself to keep distance. When Grace offered him a spoonful to taste, he accepted without thinking. The moment the flavors touched his tongue, his world jolted. It tasted like his late wife's recipe. Not similar, identical. The same soft sweetness, the same herb he could never identify, even after years of trying. The shock tightened his chest, pulling old grief from its quiet corner. He stared at Grace, unable to mask his reaction. She misread his silence instantly and stepped back, hands folding nervously. "It is nothing special," she said softly. "A retired couple in Queens taught me how to make it. They said food can make loneliness feel less heavy." She looked almost proud, unaware of the storm she had stirred inside him. Daniel nodded, offering a tight, quick smile, but suspicion threaded itself through his thoughts. Coincidence, he told himself. Nothing more. Yet his instincts, sharpened by loss and years of protecting Emma from a world that didn't care, did not rest. That night, long after Grace and Emma had gone to sleep, he sat in the glow of his computer screen and typed Grace Bennett into the search bar. The truth revealed itself within seconds. A headline, a glossy photo, an accusation that had once devoured the fashion world. A rising talent suspected of stealing designs from a major showcase. Her face in the picture was polished, hopeful, untouched by the cold that now clung to her like a permanent residue. The article had no conviction, only speculation, but the internet had done the rest, turning her name into something stained. Daniel leaned back, unease carving into him. He wanted to believe she was harmless, but doubt bled in like winter through a cracked window. The next morning, he found her in the hallway folding Emma's cardigan with quiet precision. Grace sensed the shift in him the way wounded animals sense storms. "Something is on your mind," she said. He hesitated, then held up his phone. The article glowed between them like a lit fuse. Grace scanned it briefly, then looked up without surprise. "Yes," she said. "That is me." Her voice did not wobble. Her eyes did not plead. She explained with clarity born from exhaustion. Sponsors withdrew her landlord, increased rent, friends vanished, and the man she trusted emptied her account before disappearing. People believed the rumor because it was easier than believing her. When she finished, she asked the only question that mattered. "Do you believe me?" Daniel opened his mouth, but hesitation flickered across his face. That tiny pause was enough. Grace's expression shuddered. "Thank you for your honesty," she murmured, voice thin but composed. She turned away, already gathering her few belongings, the quiet certainty of someone accustomed to leaving before being pushed. Emma would not understand. Daniel knew that. And yet, he let the moment happen, even as a part of him twisted in regret. Because doubt, once rooted, was hard to silence. The door had barely clicked shut behind Grace, before Emma's cry pierced the hallway, small and trembling like a thread pulled too tight. Daniel knelt to soothe her, but even as he wrapped his arms around his daughter, his mind churned with everything unspoken. Grace Bennett walked away with the calm of someone who had rehearsed her exit too many times. She did not slam the door. She did not look back. She simply disappeared into the bitter Chicago evening, the sky swallowing her, as if it had been waiting for her return. Night settled heavy over the Carter home. Daniel tucked Emma into bed and whispered reassurances he did not entirely believe. "She was our family," Daddy Emma said, pointing to the drawing taped beside her pillow. 3 figures holding hands beneath a sunburst. The simplicity of it cracked something inside him. Emma fell asleep eventually, but Daniel did not. His thoughts circled the same doubts, the same guilt, the same fear that he had been wrong about Grace. The soup, the scar, the way she held Emma with instinctive care. Nothing aligned neatly anymore. Near midnight, the house finally quieted. With exhaustion tugging at him, Daniel slipped toward his room. Only then did he notice the faint glow spilling from Emma's door. Her bed was empty. Panic hit him like a blow. He ran through the hall and burst out onto the porch. Snow fell in soft, relentless sheets, and through the blur, he spotted a small figure trudging down the driveway, wearing slippers and determination. Emma. He shouted her name, but the wind carried it away. She kept going, drawn by some distant point of hope only she could see. Daniel sprinted after her boots, sinking into snowdrifts. Halfway down the block, he heard another sound, a soft hum beneath the street lamp. Grace sat on the curb, knees drawn up, her breath fogging faintly. She looked smaller than he remembered, wrapped in her frayed coat, trying to be invisible, even in her own solitude. Emma reached her before Daniel did. The little girl stumbled, slipping on ice, falling hard against her palm. Blood bloomed across the snow, a small crimson star. Emma whimpered, and Grace jolted to life. She knelt instantly, pulling a folded handkerchief from her pocket, binding the wound with gentle precision. "Hold still, sweetheart," she murmured, brushing tears from Emma's cheeks with hands warmer than her own body. "It will stop hurting soon." Daniel arrived, breathless, heart-hammering, watching the scene unfold beneath the street lamp's halo. The cold Chicago night fell away. All he saw was the way Grace held Emma steady, tender, instinctively protective. Something inside him cracked open. He realized this was not a woman running from her past. This was someone who, despite being broken, kept choosing to shelter others. Emma looked up at him, clutching Grace's coat. "I wanted to find her daddy." Her voice wavered. "She is my mommy." Grace froze, breath-catching shock widening her tired eyes. Daniel knelt, snow settling on his shoulders. "Thank you," he whispered to Grace, voice raw. 2 words carrying more truth than any explanation he could offer. The wind stilled. The night held its breath. Daniel met Grace's gaze, the vulnerability there startling him with its honesty. "We need you," he said quietly. Not as a replacement, not as a guest, as something real. Emma pressed her face into Grace's chest, small fingers gripping tightly, as though afraid she would vanish again. For a moment, Grace did not move. Then slowly her arms wrapped around Emma, holding her with a trembling certainty. Daniel exhaled, relief and fear tangling inside him. The storm outside faded. A different kind of storm began, and together, without another word, they walked back home. The days that followed unfolded with a delicate tentative warmth, as though the Carter home had begun to breathe differently with Grace beneath its roof again. She moved through the kitchen with quiet confidence, teaching Emma how to shape cookie dough into imperfect stars, showing her how colors blended to soften a drawing. Daniel watched from doorways, arms crossed, trying to maintain the careful distance he believed necessary, though that distance thinned each day. Grace was not a guest now, not entirely, but not fully rooted either. She existed in a fragile in-between, afraid to lean too heavily on the comfort forming around her. One Saturday afternoon, they baked together as sunlight drifted through frosted windows. Emma stood on her stool flower, dusting her nose like snow. "We need extra sugar, Mommy," she chirped without thinking. Grace froze, a soft shock rippling through her. Daniel looked up sharply, but instead of correcting Emma, he let the words settle in the air like a fragile gift. Grace smiled faintly and returned to stirring the batter. Later, Emma drew 3 hands, overlapping in the middle of a painted sun, and wrote carefully beneath it, "This is love." Daniel felt something in his chest, loosen a knot untangling after years of quiet grief. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep clutching her newly drawn picture, the house slipped into a stillness that felt almost sacred. Grace curled on one end of the sofa with a mug of herbal tea. Daniel placed it there minutes earlier, an unspoken gesture of truce or maybe gratitude. He took the armchair across from her, watching the fire cast warm shadows along her face. "You have made this place lighter," he said, not as flattery, but as confession. Grace lowered her gaze. "It is your home. I am just passing through." He shook his head once slowly. "No, it is not just that." The air thickened electric with possibility. Grace finally looked at him, her eyes reflecting both longing and terror, the battle she had been fighting inside herself since the night under the street lamp. Daniel leaned forward the room, shrinking to the small space between them. For a fleeting, suspended moment, the world went quiet enough for hope to appear real. He moved toward her, almost brushing her lips with his, but Grace pulled back breath, unsteady. "I cannot," she whispered. His expression faltered. "Why?" She rose to her feet, the tremor in her voice betraying the strength she tried to project. "Because I cannot be her," meaning his late wife. The accusation was not spoken, but it hung heavy. Daniel stood as well, eyes darkening. "I am not asking you to be her. You think I want a ghost? I want you." Grace shook her head. "People leave when they see the full truth. I have been left before. It cost me everything." Daniel forced his voice steady. "That is fear talking, not truth." But she stepped backward, pain flaring across her face. "You say that nothing ever happened, that no real threat exists, but you remind me with every careful silence that I am measured against someone I can never replace." The rope between them pulled taut, then snapped. Without another word, Grace walked toward the door, shoulders tight steps, wavering only once. Daniel did not stop her. His fists curled helplessly at his sides as the door closed behind her, with a soft, final click. The unfinished moment lingered in the room, heavy as smoke. Upstairs, he found Emma awake, clutching the bear Grace once mended. "Is she coming back?" the child asked. Daniel hesitated, swallowed, and whispered the truth he feared. "I do not know. But I hope she does." The house felt hollow after Grace's departure, as if every clock inside it had slowed by half. Morning light spilled across the kitchen table where Emma sat with untouched crayons, her small chin resting in her palms. The chair beside her, the one Grace had naturally begun to fill, remained stubbornly empty. Daniel tried to resume routine, tried to pretend the silence did not feel like a wound reopening. But even he felt the absence pressing into the walls, reshaping the quiet into something sharp. 3 days after Grace left, Daniel walked through the guest room to tidy it, expecting to find only folded blankets and the faint memory of her perfume. Instead, he found an envelope placed neatly on the pillow. His name was not written on it. Only one word appeared in soft cursive Emma. His breath hitched. He sat on the edge of the bed and opened it slowly, almost reverently, as though the paper itself might break if mishandled. Inside was a letter written in blue ink, the words slightly smudged, as if touched by tears before drying. "Sweetheart," it began, "you are the first person in a long time to call me Mommy. And I did not know how much I needed to hear it until you did." Grace's voice echoed in the rhythm of the lines, delicate yet steady. "But before I can be someone's mother, I have to learn how to believe I deserve to be. There are pieces of me still stitching themselves together." Daniel closed his eyes, and the meaning sinking deep. This was not a woman running from responsibility or fear alone. This was a woman fighting the shadows of abandonment that had shaped her entire life. He continued reading. "I want to be the kind of woman you can look up to, not just for cookies or drawings or songs, but for choosing love over fear. For now I have to go, not because I do not love you, but because I do." She ended with a final wish. "I hope one day I will be brave enough to walk back through that door, not as someone passing through, but as someone who finally knows where she belongs." When Daniel finished the letter, he realized his hands were trembling. The edges of the paper had softened beneath his grip. He did not know how long he sat there, only that the ache in his chest had grown heavier, threaded with something dangerously close to hope. That evening, Emma curled beside him on the couch, clutching her stuffed bear. "Daddy," she whispered, "did she leave because I was not good?" Her voice cracked on the last word. Daniel pulled her into his arms, feeling her small body tremble. "No, sweetheart. She left because she needed to remember how strong she is." Emma pressed her cheek into his shirt, her voice barely audible. "Will she come back?" Daniel looked toward the window where night had begun to settle, quiet and unyielding. "I think she wants to," he said softly. "But sometimes love needs time." Emma nodded slowly, her fingers curling around his. "Then we will wait," she whispered. And for the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to believe that waiting did not mean losing. It meant faith in something still unfolding. The charity gala shimmered beneath strands of soft gold lights, the kind that made everything appear touched by warmth, even when winter still ruled outside. Guests drifted through the venue in tailored suits and elegant dresses, admiring displays of vibrant textile art and framed sketches. At the center of the room stood a dress so quietly stunning it drew attention without asking for it. Its hem was stitched with tiny interlocking hands, a silent testament to connection. Grace Bennett watched from the wings of the stage, her blonde hair braided loosely, her pulse unsteady. She had rebuilt her career piece by piece, but success could not quiet the emptiness in her chest. She scanned the crowd as if searching for an anchor she feared she had lost. The host stepped up to the microphone. "And now we have a very special reading by a very special young guest." A ripple of delight traveled through the audience as a small girl in a soft pink dress emerged from the side aisle. Emma Carter walked onto the stage, her curls bouncing, a crumpled sheet of paper clutched tightly in her hands. Grace felt her heart collide with her ribs. Emma raised the microphone with the seriousness of someone carrying truth. "My name is Emma," she began. "I used to have just a daddy. He is really smart and makes the best waffles, but sometimes he was sad." She paused, her gaze drawn directly to Grace. "Then one day we met someone. She had cold hands but a warm heart, and she did not laugh when I called her mommy." A hush fell across the room, the kind that lifted every word like a fragile offering. She did not stay long. Emma continued, her voice trembling, but she left songs and hugs and soup that tastes like love. Grace's breath caught. The words unraveled her defenses with devastating gentleness. Emma unfolded her paper, blinking through tears. "So this is my poem. Home is not walls or pillows or lights. Home is when she sang to me and kissed my sleepy head. Home is where my daddy smiles and holds her hand so tight. Home is where my mommy is. And maybe that is tonight." The applause rose softly, reverently. Grace stood frozen, barely feeling her own tears break free. Then she saw him. Daniel stepped forward through the audience, holding something carefully in both hands. When he reached her, he lifted a wooden frame. Inside lay the silk scarf she had wrapped around Emma that first snowy night, preserved behind glass. "I framed the day I met you," he said quietly. That was the day home began to return. Grace stared, her breath shaking. "I thought I left too much damage behind to deserve any future," she whispered. Daniel shook his head gently. "I kept people away believing it would protect Emma. But letting you in gave us more, not less." His voice thickened. "We were not meant to live without what you brought us." She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded slip of paper, edges worn. Daniel recognized it instantly, the note he left beside her tea that first morning. "You are not invisible." She held it out. "You saw me before I knew how to see myself again." Emma's small figure appeared at the edge of the stage, hope shining across her face like a rising sun. Grace looked at both of them, her voice breaking open at last. "Then, I think I would like to come home." Emma ran into her arms, laughing through tears. The audience applauded once more, not for fashion or fame, but for something far rarer, a family rediscovered beneath the glow of a winter night. Morning settled over the Carter home with a gentleness that felt almost unreal, as if the walls themselves were relearning how to hold warmth. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, washing the counters in gold. Emma stood on her small step stool, pressing a cookie cutter into buttery dough with the authority of a seasoned baker. Beside her, Grace Bennett rolled up her sleeves, laughter softening her features, flour dusted across her cheeks like a memory of snow. "Do not forget the hearts," Emma reminded seriously. "Hearts mean love." Grace nodded, smiling. "How could I forget the most important shape?" In the doorway, Daniel leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching them with a quiet wonder he no longer tried to hide. The sight of them together, one girl by birth, one by fate, loosened something deep inside him. For years he had lived with the sensation that some vital piece was missing, a hollow rhythm inside the house. But now, as he watched Grace tie Emma's apron, that emptiness felt healed, replaced by a fullness he barely recognized. Daniel moved forward, placing gentle hands on both their backs, before pressing a kiss to the top of Emma's head and then to Grace's. "This is the first morning in years I did not wake up feeling like something was missing," he admitted. Grace looked up, startled by the tenderness in his voice, her expression softening into something unguarded and real. On the counter lay a small card that had arrived with the morning mail. Grace had written it in delicate, looping script, "Let us learn to stay." The word struck Daniel with unexpected force. Staying had always terrified him as much as it terrified her. Grief had taught him how to survive, not how to hope. Love had left scars on both of them, scars that whispered warnings even now. But the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and rising dough, and two warm voices filled the air like a promise. For the first time, Daniel believed staying was possible. Later that morning, he led Grace and Emma down the hallway to a door they had passed countless times without opening. He paused with his hand on the knob. "I have been saving this space," he said, though I did not understand why until now. When he opened the door, sunlight poured across a studio arranged with careful intention. A drafting table stood by the window. Spools of fabric lined one wall. A mood board weighted with blank patterns and color palettes. On the far side, mounted neatly, hung a small plaque. Grace's Tomorrow. A place to begin again. Grace stepped inside, slowly, fingertips, brushing the table's smooth edge, her breath catching. "I never imagined anyone would build a room for me," she whispered. Daniel moved behind her, voice steady. "You built something in us first. This is only giving you back a foundation." From the kitchen came Emma's bright shout. "Pancakes, Mommy and Daddy." Grace turned, eyes bright with tears she did not hide. Daniel offered his hand. She took it, and together they returned to the kitchen where Emma had arranged mismatched plates and a crooked pile of cookies. On the table, Grace placed a handkerchief she had been secretly embroidering. "Family is made not by blood, but by the hands that hold you when you are lost." Daniel traced the final word, meeting her gaze. Grace looked at him, then at Emma, and smiled with certainty. They had not found perfection. They had found home. When a story reminds us that love is often rebuilt from broken pieces, it becomes more than fiction. It becomes a quiet lesson. Grace, Daniel, and little Emma show that healing is not found in perfection, but in the courage to stay, to trust again, to let a new future take root where loss once lived. As a narrative specialist, I can say that few stories illustrate chosen family with such emotional honesty and psychological depth. If this journey touched something in you, let your support help more people discover it. A simple like or subscribe keeps these soul-centered stories alive and growing. And before you go, share your heart in the comments with one short phrase that reflects what home means to you. Try writing "Found Home." Found.